Hello everyone, this is Jasmine, aka Gladiatorinsweats, and I'm here with the new moon in Cancer reading for the collective. I'm going to start off with a little bit of info about the planetary transits, and then I'm going to go into the tarot reading. So, just to talk a little bit about where the sun and moon will be conjunct. Will be in Cancer, obviously, at 20 degrees, and so as I have been doing, going to some of the descriptions of the Chandra symbols by Elias Lonsdale. I think I'll actually try and link that in the description box for any of those that want to purchase it or look for it yourself or whatnot. But this is labeled at 20 degrees, many brightly colored tropical fish. Also describes leaving the conscious levels high and dry. I perceive this as really kind of saying, you know what, I'm not going to listen to my ego or my logical mind that always wants to kind of put things in their place, and if it doesn't fit in a certain place, then fine, it doesn't make sense and it can't possibly be, right? In a place where you can believe in magic, where you can believe in the impossible, believe in miracles. And that's where the heart of manifestation starts, with the imagination, right? Where you imagine what it is that you desire, where you imagine what it is that you want to feel, or what it is that you want to taste or touch or feel or hear, whatever it is, and then you're able to kind of conceptualize it within your mind, then manifest it or put it out to the universe, with your words, with your speech, with your touch, with your action, whatever it is. Also mentions all livingness is excluded by consciousness and vice versa. So it mentions the duality being so static and repetitive, it must yield to a whole new way of being in this world when every other option is used up. And so what comes to mind is the quote goes something like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting the same result or different results. So that's kind of the way that I feel this kind of happened for a lot of us, where for those of us that are maybe a little bit more stubborn or a little bit harder to believe in, or not even just believe, but maybe just stuck more in the Eight of Swords energy of being trapped in, well, this has to be, fit in a certain box, or this is the way that I feel, have been told, or I have always thought it had to be, kind of mindset. But that's honestly insanity. And it's the ironic part where we can kind of see those that are willing to step out of the box as those that are insane. This is actually taking place around 20 and 21 degrees. It's kind of in the middle, but a little bit leaning into the 21st degree. So I did want to mention that energy too, because I feel that that's also being picked up here. And is labeled high up on a mountain an eagle's nest. So just picturing that, I see this as us taking a higher vantage point of us being above the clouds, possibly above a little bit of the regular mental discussion and the mental disarray, and seeing above it to where you're kind of seeing how it's all playing out, or you're seeing how, I guess that is how I am seeing it, as it's being orchestrated. Also, more mention of heritage and birthright, the soul's inheritance. This is actually something that I mentioned more in the tarot reading, or more in the oracle cards, of us actually realizing that it's actually our birthright to be abundant and plentiful, to have enough food to fill ourselves, to have homes to cover ourselves and our families, to have clothes on our backs, to be able to create, to be able to create community. That this abundant, that Empress card energy, that heart space energy. Even that's just where all of love kind of begins, or I don't want to say begins, but that's where it expresses from, right? And so again, there's mention of wakefulness, being vigilant, being clear, having the faculties to sift through and find what needs to be seen, being able to parse through and really see what really actually matters. Like, okay, yeah, such and such hurt me, they did this, such and such said that. Okay, but what actually really matters underneath this? What did I learn from this? Or what did I do in this? Or how did I ultimately feel about this, and what did it show me about myself through this? Asking those sorts of questions. Also, it says, untouched by personal limitations and distortions. So again, this touches back into that Eight of Swords card energy that is actually in the reading for the collective. So again, I feel like that's a heavy mention, or all of that mental energy, but centered around this being trapped in fear, being trapped in mental prisons, being trapped in a lot of mental manipulation. And ultimately, I see this as the ego stepping aside, the higher self taking the driver's seat. Us, we're still experiencing, obviously, we're still here, we still are, going about the motions. I don't want to really express it as going about the motions, but we're just, I feel, processing things and thinking from a higher level, from a higher perspective, so that we're able to really tap into our karmic past and understand a bit more wisdom and understanding of like where we're coming from, where other people are coming from in their own pain, and really being able to change the way that we behave and ultimately change the way that we perceive, because everything is about the way that we perceive. We could all be experiencing the same thing and all perceive it a different way. So there was one more thing that I did want to mention, because Pluto is opposite the sun and moon at 20 degrees Capricorn. But I know that there are those, including myself, that have planets around here. I know particularly those born around January through to July of 93 have Capricorn, have Neptune and Uranus conjunct here. So I know that those particularly may resonate with wow, my words are all over the place, with this message. So if you do have any kind of planets here, you might resonate with this heavily as well. But I feel the collective is also feeling this energy, carrying this energy beneath the surface as it's bubbling up. So at 20 degrees Capricorn, it's labeled or described as many different perfumes carried by a breeze. And so in this, it mentions standing with the lineup of our past lives and following out the journey they were all leading to. And so, again, as this goes back to this, I see this as like, I don't know why I just pictured unraveling a braid. And like just moving up a braid, and as like your fingers are just pulling it out, and when you just pull out an entire braid and it just all falls apart and you just see everything. And I don't know why that came to mind, but I just picked up on like an unraveling of our lives. At times needing to do whatever you can on your own, denying the awareness of the external, the illusions of light. So this picks up on what I mentioned in the reading of us maybe not paying so much attention to what is being shown in the external so much, paying to attention, to the internal, paying attention and bringing awareness within. Feeling destiny charged in a larger than life fashion. I feel this heavily as all of us are not just wanting to follow our higher path or do, follow our destiny, but I feel like a lot of us are feeling this in a way where it's like we can't deny it anymore. We can't ignore it. And a lot of us feel like we can't do anything other than that, like to the point where we're, leaving and dropping situations that have always made us feel unhappy, but now we feel that our desires are outgrowing our fears, to where it's not necessarily that we're fearless, but it's like our hearts are just big enough now. They're just, enlarged, and they're just indulged enough now to where they're like, I can go out on a limb and do this. I got the heart to do this. Even if this takes a while and I've got to grind and I've got to stay passionate about it, I've got the heart and the stamina to do it. Being self-possessed, an overwhelming desire to clear the karmic slate, to free what's been trapped and bound. Again, as I've said, and I feel like this is a collective thing that's feeling for everyone, but as I mentioned, those that have some personal planets there, or even just have planets there, ultimately I feel like it's this feeling like we've come into this in order to clear these lines, whether it's for ourselves or whether it's for our bloodlines or whether it's for just the collective. We're here, having this overwhelming desire to just free ourselves from these issues so that everyone can live a peaceful, happy life. I feel like that's been a heavy message that my generation and the younger generation, I feel heavily felt really driven to. Feeling guided, cosmically supported on this destined journey that is central to your world. I feel like this connects to the all-encompassing hand that we have as our oracle card for this new moon, of being guided, being supported, that even as we fall in every move, know that we are supported, that we are being guided, that even the tears and the pain and the blood and the sweat, all of it is ultimately working in our favor, and turning the darkest hours into the brightest breakthroughs by refusing to stop anywhere or to back down from your resolve to wake up this time and get on the greater path at long last. And I feel this with this sacrifice card that we have here in the spread, but also just this overwhelming need to, with this waking up, I feel this as really us talking about us shifting out of this 3D matrix that has kind of been holding a lot of, or not even a lot of, but all of humanity ultimately in this whole game of, live, work, consume, and die. This whole process of just reincarnating and doing the same things kind of over and over and over. Which does lead me into what is mentioned for Capricorn at 21 degrees. A stately old house in a ruined condition. And I feel like this is actually also tying into a new gown, the bottom of the deck oracle card, where there's karmic entanglement in patterns, syndromes, and worlds which have no future. Again, tying back into really going back into these karmic issues. And I don't even just see it as issues, but where I see it as like timelines, where there's just different timelines where we're really going back into them, just pulling out the knots, or really not going back into them, but like consolidating all the timelines so that you're able to work out all the knots kind of all at once. And then you're able to just work out the kinks and the patterns and so that you're able to clear it, and you're able to come to this 0 point where now it's not having to spend so much time working out the karma, but now you get to spend time just creating. There's also intent on salvaging the essence spark of what was once there. So yeah, as I was saying before, of kind of really getting back to the root, really getting back to the core. Even as we have with this bottom of the shaft of the spread, we have this Ace of Cups. So I see this even as just going back to the root, and the root of it is of love, is kind of expression, of creation, a following out of a script, fulfilling a fate, every line written ahead of time. I felt that this was relative, or also kind of speaking about Mars, around the south node, where it's now also retrograde, so it's spending a lot more time not only in Aquarius, but spending a lot more time transiting the south node than regular, where we're not just following out a script, but I feel with this retrograde, we're getting to clear out the script. We're getting to re-look over the script. We're getting to look it over again and be like, okay, actually, this is not the final draft, and I'm going to go back over, fill in some things that I feel can be rewritten until Mars goes back around, where, it gets another time to look over what it did, what it might like to do better again, and then it can hopefully rewrite the script once more. Bound up what would seem to be no longer happening, yet inwardly brooding upon the echoes of what went wrong, of what was lost, of the severances and the tragedies. So all of this tying in with this, these karmic patterns of us going back to the root, of us going back and really understanding our quote unquote issues, the things that we view as negative, or the things that we view as not really working for us. Being able to not just go back to that, but kind of shaking ourselves out of it and seeing that it's not really actually happening anymore. Not necessarily just happening anymore, but if I take a more practical example, if we talk about something like slavery, something that Kanye West brought up about slavery being a choice. And I remember, of all the tweets he had been tweeting, he'd been tweeting a lot that week. He had been putting out a lot of very interesting tweets. That was the one tweet that had seemed to blow up, and that seemed to be the one thing that everyone was able to grasp and say they hated Kanye for. But I digress from that to say, we can think about something like slavery. We can see how we do spend a lot of time going back into the history of it, because it's necessary. It's necessary for us to know where we came from. So that's why that's why we have been spending a lot of time bringing back up our own personal history as well as collective history. But what can happen is we can get trapped in the depths of what has happened. We can get stuck, or we can kind of let ourselves drown in it a little bit, to where now we feel like that's all that really ever is, or what's really actually happening, when it's really not anymore. When and not necessarily where it's not just not, but where it's you're able to kind of pull yourself out and be able to say, okay, so yes, those things did happen, but those aren't necessarily me. Those don't necessarily describe me at my truest essence. But that's just one particular case that you may or may not resonate with. So, and then the very last thing I want to mention about this before I head into the reading was this mention of being doomed to stay in the lost places until divine spirit intervenes. Self-sentenced to limbo, half glad of it, half miserable, and full of longings. And I felt like that was important, because I feel that a lot of us, maybe not necessarily just need to hear, but we're starting to understand, or maybe some of us are just now starting to see how us waking up is not just coincidence, that this was all part of the plan. Like, it was all a part of our whole story for it to happen this way. So that it's this whole idea of self-sentence to limbo. I really see this as, again, like, we came into this experience and chose this experience, or the experiences that we have, in order for us to, reach some sort of learning, or for us, it just all plays its part. There's so much nuance and complexity to how everything works. It's so easy to say that it all happens for a reason, and then be able to bring up something, very traumatic or tragic, and then try and be like, well, what was I supposed to learn in that? But I don't want people to get lost in that. I want people to kind of see, again, how it's supposed to be about the whole story, how it all kind of leads you and takes you not only to the highs but the lows. Like, you're not even able to appreciate the highs, in the capacity that you can, or that you are, without having to experience the lows. There is no high without a low, to be honest, or not even just to be honest, but realistically. So I think that's it for what I had as far as the planetary transits. Let me just do one quick look through. I mentioned that this was opposite Pluto. So again, there is this heavy transformation of us really having to face our fears, having to face a lot of our emotional wounds, facing our issues around nurturing, facing issues maybe surrounding the maternal side of our family, and issues on that bloodline. But I feel like the tarot reading will probably go into a little bit more. So let's just head into that. Hello, everyone. All right, so this is the tarot reading for the new moon in Cancer for the collective. So, doing this a little bit differently. I'll just have the picture so you guys can see the picture of the spread, and I'll just I guess do the reading orally, as opposed to having it all over video. So we'll try this a little bit differently. The first thing I want to mention, as we have in the center here, transformation with the Three of Cups over top of it. I've actually did a couple readings, or really only did 2 readings for this, but I did 2 readings. The Three of Cups came up in both readings, and transformation kept coming up as I was shuffling for the second reading. So ultimately, I feel like that has been the message, or not even just the message, but the feeling that the collective has been in, just a very deep transformational time within our relationships, within how we connect with other people, and how we enjoy ourselves with other people. I also see this also as us learning our own boundaries with other people, learning the right and wrong people for us, and that being in a very deep way, not just with our friends or our coworkers, but also with our family members that can be maybe toxic in this moment, or what have you, people that can be very close to you. I feel like this ties into even with the colorful new coat. There's this what came to me as I was doing this reading was of Joseph and his coat of many colors, and I don't remember very much about it or about this story, but I do know that he was very gifted, he was very talented, very powerful. Ultimately he was feared because he was powerful, because people already knew that he was going to have some sort of power over them. And so his brothers, the people that were closest to him, ultimately, tried to kill him, or wanted him. No, they did try to kill him, and ultimately, sold him off to be a slave, ultimately got rid of him as best as they could. And through that, I'm sure it was very emotionally painful for him, but all he could really do is go along with what had happened to him, right? So ultimately, through his path, long story short, he gains a lot of knowledge, about himself, about, just developing new skills, things like that. He develops, high status in the new place that he resides. He eventually is no longer a slave, but someone that, people, look to, people deem of high recognition. And eventually the brothers come around to, well, not even coming around to, they end up in poverty. They end up needing to come to him for help and for support. And in that moment, Joseph could have been what people would call just, or what some people would consider just, right? And not give him the food. But he had clarity. He had a higher understanding that none of his path, he couldn't have gotten where he was without all that had happened, right? And that's ultimately what he tells his brothers as he, gives them the food so that they're able to feed their family. But he also, invites his family back, to let him know, because this whole, I mean, if you know anything about this story, you can go look at it more yourself, I suppose. But ultimately, what I'm trying to say is there's this lesson that or at least that is trying to be shown to us, that through our pain, through our mistakes, our losses, all of that comes transformation. Like, that is where the change comes from. That's where, clarity can come from. Well, really, that's the purpose of these dark times, or of dark, quote unquote, times. Underneath this Three of Cups, like I said, is this transformation card. It actually appears a woman that has butterfly wings, and so I'm also feeling it's like a butterfly. We're also in a metamorphosis, but more so tapping into this divine feminine fire of rebirth. I think of Pluto as, well, I assume most people do, but I think of Pluto as a feminine fire, it's got a feminine masculine mix, but it's a very, it's very much of a feminine vibe to me. And so there's this collective but also individual change through facing our personal and collective fears, our own fears within our own personal relationships, but also on the macro, on the world scale, on the, national scale, on the local scale, whatever, on every level, how there's a universe within universes. That's ultimately how you can look at it, the way different entities reside within different entities and within different principalities. But I digress. Let's see, what else did I want to mention? Just looking at my notes a little bit before I move on. All right, so moving on to this Stand Your Ground card with this Trapped in Fear card. This Trapped in Fear card, as I touched on with the transformation card, of us maybe being stuck in our fears and our doubts. But with the Stand Your Ground card, I see this as us in this battle of really being pulled out. Like, we see the light, and then we or if you want to, use that sort of analogy, where we see the light and we start to feel happier or lighter or brighter, and then we start to kind of sink back into our doubts, into our mental prisons. Even the way that, we have this Seven of Wands with the Eight of Swords. So I feel like there's always this push, but it feels like with every 7 steps that, you fall down 8 times, or you take 8 steps back. So, but with this, as you have this awareness card with this Five of Swords and Three of Swords together as the above. Through this comes a higher understanding. Understanding. Through this comes knowledge. Through trial and error. Ultimately, there's supposed to be a higher understanding. There's supposed to be some sort of lesson that comes from this. But it's not even just about learning a lesson. The way that I even see this 5 and 3 as above, and then you have the 8 of Swords as below, and then we have awareness on top of kind of all of this. I see it as really parsing out what's really true and what's really just kind of part of the story, and really there to help you see the truth. Even when I look at the transformation card, the number 13, and I think of where we're seeing this 13, and then you see the 1 with awareness of, again, seeing things from the higher perspective, seeing things from the divine orchestrator's perspective, if you will. Even the way that we do have the crown chakra over here at the top on the right side as well. Moving into this future position, we do have this 4 of Swords. So overall, I do want to say the energy is very much in our mind. So I do feel the focus is returning to our mental center of even when we do get triggered and we react maybe before we think about what's really going on, to even just take that moment to kind of think, to kind of mull it over, and to reach a higher understanding, and not and to let it go and let the lesson go. The way that you can see in this Rest and Rejuvenate card, even the way that he sits and in a pretty standard meditation position with their palms up though, so it's in a very receiving position too. So of receiving the guidance, not so much of really needing to do. I mean, of course, there's constructive things that you can kind of mentally do, but as far as physical, you don't see a lot of fire here on the spread. There's only this stand your ground, but I feel that's really much more in a spiritual way. And so over this next 2 weeks, moving into the full moon, I do feel that that's kind of ultimately the guidance or advice that I would give, is here in this 4 of Swords, even when I see it as like a broken down of the 8 of Swords, of being able to kind of break problems down to their kind of common denominator, and really seeing the underlying problem or underlying issue or underlying message or story that's being played under everything. Also see this as, again, of maybe just being not so much with the physical eyes, but with the third eye, of seeing things with a higher intuition, just a higher mind. And not just that, but also just think of using your other senses, even just using your sense of hearing. I imagine, for some reason, when I look at this Rest and Rejuvenate card, but also when I think of a lot of this Neptunian energy that I do feel is here, of maybe receiving messages through music, through maybe TV that you watch, or just any sort of like entertainment or kind of like Neptunian kinds of activities. So, oh, and I do want to just touch on the bottom of the deck being this positive movement forward card. This 8 of, this would be the 8 of Pentacles. Yes. Yes, I believe it's the 8 of Pentacles. Yes. So, sorry, the red always throws me off, because always... Anyway, so as we get into the right side of the spread here. Just starting here with this Ace of Cups. I see this in a very, honestly, in a positive way, where, or I honestly see this whole right side as a positive way, and it's really hard not to when you see this hope and light here in the center, even though you see a card like sacrifice at the top. But with the sacrifice card, even if I just kind of start there, what comes to mind is baptism. What comes to mind is like seeing like the brightest, most colorful rainbows after the most crazy storms pass. I also think of, and that's kind of what I also see with this Love Begins, as it's really our journey into our journey with love, our journey with rediscovering our relationship with love, rediscovering our relationship, what we define love as. With the Ace, that is the root of cup, the root of emotion. And that's also what I think of here. Also think of the fact that we have this root chakra card here with this heart chakra card as well, of this purging, this clearing, this rebirthing of our heart, and really opening our heart space to release fear, to release doubt. But this is really tied with love and with compassion for ourselves and others. So ultimately, I feel it always starts with ourselves before it starts with others. So ultimately, it comes back to where we feel that we may not feel worthy of love, where we may feel we are not worthy of abundance, where we may feel that we're not worthy of a lot of money, or we're not worthy of the things that we desire. Whether this is because other people have been consistently telling us that, and so that's really what we've been programmed, or what has been running in our minds this whole time, or whether it's something that even we've kind of carried on ourselves, even if we don't have anyone around us kind of like directly telling us that. It may be like a message that we kind of replay on ourselves. And I don't even want to put it in a frame of something like we necessarily do to ourselves, because ultimately I see ourselves just as conduits of energy. I see ourselves as the conduit. When I think of Virgo, and I think of Chiron, and I think of it being this intermediary between the physical and the spiritual. And that's kind of what I think that this whole experience is really like this this in-between space, or that's kind of what I feel at least this time is where like we're in this space of kind of regaining our intuition, regaining our abilities, but also being in this like in-between space of like breaking out of our very like quote unquote humanness, if you will. Even just when I look at the heart chakra card, and I think of the Merkaba, and I think of like that's what I really see that our bodies are as these vehicles that we use. These vehicles that we use to kind of travel, if you will, or traverse this physical plane. Moving into this hope and light card here, I just see this honestly as just grand collective awakening, with this being the Aquarius and Sun card. This is on, I feel a personal and collective. I see this almost like this light card being in the hope card's hands, like us really touching, really attaining, really being able to feel or see, like maybe just catching a glimpse of what is or what could be. Like I really don't even have words for it, for what I'm trying to like what's kind of in my head. in the moment. But that's really just how I see this, honestly, is like just a really grand collective, like, I just see this as like people just like going off like light bulbs. I don't know. That's just the way that I see it. With this sacrifice card here at the top with this crown chakra card, again, as I mentioned, with this feeling of baptism, but going back to what I said earlier about what was mentioned about the degrees at, or what was mentioned with Cancer at 20 and 21 degrees of, let me just go back to it to look at it, of the many brightly colored tropical fish, of being able to see all the lights, of, kind of closing your eyes and really imagining things. I think of like, I believe it's Fantasia, the Disney movie that comes to mind. I don't even think I've really seen the whole film, but that's what's coming to mind. But also, when we speak of like this dawning of a new gown that is mentioned here or shown here at the bottom of the deck of the Rumi Oracle, I also just see this as like getting the most like intense baptism or like water purification so that you can don like the most beautiful, like the most elegant, the just most pristine gown, like the way the gown that like only is gonna fit on like a certain vibration on a certain person, and it's made just for you, but you have to get there, well, not really have to get there, but that you get there through releasing a certain amount of things, or not really, I don't want to say like a certain amount, but like just through this process, this deep soul cleansing process. Even the crown chakra, see that's related to Pluto. So I see this as Pluto being like the collective and being of the transformer, being this collective transformation of us really going through a collective shift, or not like this is happening like on this day or in these 2 weeks, but that's what this whole process has kind of been in. I just think that this is coming to a higher awareness, is coming to a more collective awareness, to where now we're all kind of, I think we've all started, or maybe I'm just thinking we all have been picking up on it, but more and more of us are not only just picking up on it, but we're picking up on kind of why it's happening. We're kind of picking up more on the higher understanding of the why, and like, okay, so now how are we going to get through this? Or not really how to get through this, but that just kind of like bracing and kind of just going with it and understanding that this just all has to happen. Let's see. Anything else on my notes? Developing sharp self-awareness. Going within, seeing things differently in the dark. I read, I can't remember the newsletter that I got in my email, who it was from, but something that they mentioned was like the scientific fact, or the fact that we know it's not that we can't see in the dark, it's just that we see differently, if you want to be particular about it, and so, or be real about it. So that's also the kind of feeling that I feel here with this feeling of the lights going off. Is just like, it takes a second, like, whenever you've done that in a whole bright room and the lights go off, it takes quite a minute for your eyes to settle into the darkness. It might even hurt your eyes a little bit, but it takes time, and then you settle in and you kind of get your bearings, and then you're able to continue to move forward and maybe even just learn a new way of going about things. I feel like that's maybe the process that's taking place on a personal and collective way here too, where now we're realizing we cannot trust so much of what's given to us, trust so much of the quote unquote light, because there's so much in the dark, there's so much in the unknown. And now that we are not even just gaining more control of or more access to the dark, but we're also releasing our fears of the dark, releasing our fears of it. And ultimately, the fears are programmed. Ultimately, the fears were given to us in a lot of ways because it was meant to keep us from our powers, or keep us from knowing, and keep us in these cycles, keep us being stuck in this idea that we have to fight each other. And I feel that that's been a message that has been spoken about in many different like platitudes of where we can be made to fight each other when we're fighting the wrong person. And this can be very much relative to a lot of like racial tensions or racial dynamics have been discussed often. And maybe not so much in a political sphere or public political sphere, but people have talked about how all of it is a quote unquote distraction. And it is a distraction, but I don't like to call it so much a distraction as much as it's supposed to be a lesson. Like you're supposed to be, or not even really supposed to, you're like, I digress from that. I'll move on from that because that's just to keep me on a whole other channel. So let me just finish this reading here. See if there's any other notes. Oh yeah, I just wrote about like hate versus love, and I actually wrote fear versus magic. Like when I was thinking of the opposite of fear, I feel magic is the opposite of fear. The opposite of fear, of needing to cling to what you already know, because it's what you already know, is completely throwing yourself into the unknown, of the Piscean flavor, the Neptune, the just surrendering to the process and letting whatever happens kind of happen and taking things as it will, like going total fish tart, as the Peace Dealer says. Oh, and even just the last message I was looking at with this Eight of Pentacles here, of positive movement forward, of kind of needing to release baggage in order to move forward. Even when I look at, or even when I think about boats sometimes, or in like the shows or the cartoons or the anime that I've seen, where they might have to like release some stuff for cargo so that they're able to be lighter, so that they're able to move on. Or if the ship starts sinking in it because it got hit or something, they're having to patch things up, and they're having to kind of scoop water out of the ship. And you can even see the scooping water as like, okay, releasing old emotions out of the ship that's kind of been sitting there, like emotions that were supposed to pass, but they got stuck in the ship. And that's kind of the way that I'm even seeing ourselves as, we're not necessarily, I don't even, again, want to use the word supposed to, but the process isn't necessarily supposed to be something where we hold on to the trauma so much to where it becomes something we relive day on and day on, right? So that's the way I'm seeing it, as this, with this scooping of water at the ship. And with this all-encompassing hand, I believe I will finish it there. Yes. With the all-encompassing hand, the message is, besides the fact that it is this hand that ultimately holds, the way I'm seeing this card, the way it's holding kind of this yolk, like the moon, I kind of see it as this yolk that's within the egg, but it's holding the embryo, like creating its own kind of like spiritual shell with the hand. But I guess the most basic way I would see as the, universe here to lend you a hand in whatever it is that you need help with. But I do see it as just like this divine support that everyone's kind of being held in, even as we're going through this very dark time. Even the way that you can imagine the way a mother carries her unborn child, and I'm sure the child within has, well, I'm not sure if the child has any awareness of what's going on outside, but the mother is overseeing, protecting, and guiding from a higher understanding, from a place of a higher knowing, right? Oh, know that, again, as I said, know that you're divinely supported. Know that all can be solved, all can also be resolved, and all will be resolved as you allow things to unfold as they should be. So ask for help if needed, when needed, be specific if necessary. I feel was the message with this, like, ask for help if you feel you need the help to be shown what you need to be shown. In this surrendering process, it's kind of having to be humble enough to admit that you don't know everything, that you do need a little bit of help, that you do need a little bit of guidance, or not necessarily need, but that you would appreciate some of guidance, right? Oh yeah. Also, what comes to mind is a shedding or a molting of the skin with this transformation card. When I think of like tarantulas, which is also very kind of like dark occult, very much related to Pluto. Tarantulas. I'm not sure if this is all spiders, but since I own one, they take a while to molt, and not only that, but they fast. They don't do anything. They remain still. They don't eat, and they just allow this process to happen so that they're able to molt, and it just happens very naturally for them. And so that's also kind of what I'm feeling here, is that it's kind of in a fasting process where maybe whether or not you are doing your own kind of conscious fast of any sort, there's this like stripping down to the essentials. I feel for a lot of us, we're really focusing on what really actually matters for us to thrive, what really matters for us to feel sound and supported within ourselves. I know that people are kind of feeling like not just that they're going through things, but that they're going through things alone, feeling like no one maybe could understand what they're going through. But know that that's totally not the case. That, well, first off, that everyone's really going through their own process, whether it's shown to you or not. One thing I do want to say is social media is like, it's the realm of Neptune. So it's all whatever people want to show you. So don't take anything that you do see online or whatever to face value. But ultimately in real life, even now, don't take anything, at face value. We have Neptune and Pisces in retrograde. So within, this whole, mix that I feel where Neptune is kind of leading this, or not really leading this, but, it's really playing a key factor while we've been in this grand water trine, but also with this sacrifice card here at the top. And I know that people are feeling that a lot of us feel that we're being asked to make big choices and big decisions about our life, and being worried that it's not going to be worth the return. Maybe one moment feeling, all right, I got this and I can do this, and maybe having made the jump, or maybe not, but either way, maybe moments later or whatnot, feeling like, oh no, I don't know if I can do this. Wait, was I just tripping in that moment? Was I just kind of on a self buzz in that moment and thought I could do it and I really can't? And we're really just in this kind of like in between stage of really having to fight our doubts, fighting our fears, and not just that, but having to feel as though you've maybe needed someone else to tell you that you deserved happiness, that you deserved what it is that you truly desired. Something as simple as, you maybe wanting like a new purse, or even something like a new car, or, you feeling like you deserve a loved one, you deserve a romantic partner. There's also this needing to learn that you are loved and you deserve to be loved and deserve what you truly desire, because you are here, because you are alive. To be here means that you are here to create, means that you are here to manifest. And so we're just shedding a lot of the illusions and shedding a lot of the fears and shedding a lot of our doubts, and realizing maybe that a lot of the doubts weren't even our own, realizing how a lot of these things have just been told to us, over and over and over and over for centuries and centuries. And you don't need necessarily at this point in time tarot to tell you that. You can read the history books or read certain books that people are putting out now, or certain material where you can see how our ancestors were in tune with themselves, and not just with themselves, but they were in tune with the universe, and they understood that magic was real, and they understood that anything was possible, and that it really all was within the mind, and everything is mental. And so even as we start to uncover our roots, and with that may come a lot of the nasty baggage, right? But with that also comes that divine ancient knowledge too, that connects us or helps us connect back to the universe and come back to source, come back to God, whatever it is that you may name, or just whatever it is, or whatever belief system that you may use to help yourself or help the ego mind really understand or kind of process. But I believe that is what I will end this with. Thank you so much for tuning in, for subscribing, liking, commenting, all of that great stuff. I am so appreciative, and I love to communicate, and I love to connect with everyone. So definitely feel free to reach out to me. You can also find me on Instagram. Links to that, as well as any of my previous videos or material, can be in the description box, as well as any other updates. And I believe that is it. So until next time, or until the next video, I hope everyone has a great couple 2 weeks. I hope that everyone really receives the advice of really resting, really allowing yourself to mentally but spiritually process these things, and kind of go through an upgrade. I honestly, if you want to connect this to like phones, see this as like one of those huge update packages that kind of take a minute, where the phone has kind of completely shut off, so that it's able to refix and reprogram and get everything working how it needs to be. So I send my love, and I wish everyone many blessings. So again, until next time, bye.